What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified, fantabulous, incredibly strong, can do multiple muscle-ups co-host, Grant Hughes. We are on to off-season mode officially. We've already started. We have our Atlantic Division off-season look-aheads up. We're moving on to the Pacific Division, talking about every team in there. First and foremost, though, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. If this is your first time checking us out, hit subscribe, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Those are the places that help us out the most. Ratings and reviews on Apple help us out a ton. So written reviews, ratings, please, 5 stars only. Join our Discord. The link to that is in the podcast and YouTube description. We have a great group of people in there. We would love to see it continue to grow. Follow us on all the socials at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and TikTok, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. We do make clips that are germane only to those social media platforms. So you're not just getting, I clip stuff from the podcast, but we do record actual short clips, exercise content. So please follow us there. And finally, if you have not done so, check out our merch. The store is in the podcast and YouTube description as well. If you're watching, Grant has his mug out, no dip threes. He's fueled by caffeine, no dip threes, and Hardwood Knocks. Since we're recording this immediately after our NBA Finals wrap up, still rocking a yellow melty face Hardwood Knocks tee. We've got stickers too. You could decal yourself up. Some nice, anyone watching, some thermonuclear AF and Hardwood Knocks logos. All the products come in stickers form. So, and pins and whatever. I put pins on my gym bag. What people are looking at me in the gym, Grant. I want you to know that. I see that they want to ask, like, what the fuck is that? But maybe they've Googled it and they're like, oh, it's just some shitty basketball podcast. I don't need to ask about it. But
even that would be great.
I see them when I have a thermonuclear AF shirt that I've worn to the gym a few times already. I see people looking at it like, the fuck does that mean? And they want to ask, and I feel like they eventually might ask, but I've been told that I have resting asshole face. So I don't know that they ever would ask me, but I'm waiting for it. But I'm trying to get Hardwood Knocks' name out into the public.
Yeah, it's thermonuclear asshole face is what we're talking about. That's right. You don't want that.
Everyone from my wife, my sisters, my in-laws, my friends have just told me that I have, they use different words, but that I have resting thermonuclear asshole face.
That's how I've always thought of you.
How are you doing since we last spoke many, many moons ago?
I'm good. Similarly good. I'm happy. This feels like a home game because we're doing the Pacific Division today. We're going to do a Pacific Division preview, and being on the West Coast, these are the teams I see the most. And I feel like this will be a light lift to tie all the way back into your discussion of lifting heavy things.
Just very quickly, I'm over these West Coasters coming to the East Coast to cover a finals game. They're going, how do you people on the East Coast stay up and watch sports? You motherfuckers don't got to rub it in. Like, it's not easy. You and your superior time zones, where I love Mountain. Mountain's my actual favorite one. I covered a conference finals there remotely once, and I was in love. Like 2 hours behind with it. I was like, I love this. You West Coasters like, oh, last night's game ended at 8. Finals game 5 ended at 8 p.m. Pacific time. I hate you. And then you come over here and you just rub it in our faces that we have to be up super late if we want to pay attention to the sports. Hashtag the sports.
Yeah, there's two things to know about coastal elitism. One is that it's real, and two is that it is well-founded. It's justifiable for basketball reasons, at least.
On that note, we'll begin with alphabetical order, which means we'll start with the Sacramento Kings, the Golden State Warriors. So as just a recap, we've tried to streamline this from years past. We'll go through the notable free agents, any extension eligible candidates we think matter, and we'll talk about what they could spend. And if we're talking about trades, we'll get into what assets they might have, but I'm not going to list off trade assets are more for the deadline stuff. Yeah. But do you want to take us through the Warriors, or do you want me to start?
I can start. So the basics are the things you need to know. They have a handful of key free agents. The first two of which are significant. Draymond Green and Dante DiVincenzo have player options. DiVincenzo is a lock to decline his player option because he outplayed it. Feels like potentially a mid-level guy, and the Warriors just can't do that. So he's probably a goner. Draymond Green, nobody's really sure yet what he's going to do. $27.6 million, I think, is the number. Could opt out, could extend, could opt in, extend. There's a bunch of options there. Klay Thompson is also extension eligible. His max, which there was a report that he expected it during the playoffs, and I feel like that was a little overstated. 4 years, 224 million. It's a lot of money for Klay
You
Thompson.
give it to him is what you're saying, right? And I think that's a roundabout. I have a max contract calculator in one of our Hardwood Knocks docs,
Yeah.
where I think I have all the up-to-date cap information. So it's in the 200s, though.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
rest assured.
that's sufficient. That's what you need to know to gauge the validity of his max expectation. They are extremely inflexible. They are way above the second apron. There's a chance their payroll plus taxes like $450 million or more, or somewhere in that range. So they got minimums to offer. They're not going to have really any other roster building tools. Don't have any trade exceptions. They have several needs. Although I would say before we get into that, this team. The starting five: Steph, Clay, Wiggins, Draymond, Kevon Looney, plus 22.1 per 100 during the year, best in the league over 500 possessions, plus 19.8 in the playoffs. So it works. They've got, so they will keep that in mind as we go through how many various needs they have. The first of which is obviously a shot creator that we'll talk about. Jordan Poole. He affects whether they need, how badly they need one of those. Some bigger wings, need another big maybe. So where would you like to take this? Because
let's start with the incumbents, where Draymond Green's the simplest one. Is he back?
I think he's back, and I think probably what's likely to happen is he'll be back at on a multi-year deal that starts at or below his player option number, like potentially significantly below it, and gives, goes 3-4 years. That would be my expectation. Like, 3 for 75, 4 for 100, something like that. I think it feels like the logical outcome to me. What do you think?
I would agree with you there that I don't think he's going to get, whether he declines his player option, or I don't think he's going to get a higher average annual salary than he's slated to make next year. That would surprise me if he gets over that 27 million number. And I would be shocked too if he left.
I agree. And it's not just because of the loyalty and all this other stuff. It's like the options out there that have money to pay him enough to pull him away are just not, generally speaking, great.
The only team that I think I would actually love the fit, excuse me, I have the hiccups, that could pay him, I would kind of like to see him in Indiana, just like him and Miles Turner.
Sure.
Screwing things up. But it's just not going to happen. Like, So my other question, Klay Thompson, what is the number you would be comfortable extending him at? And I'm assuming it's not, look, his max salary, I think, in that first season of what would be an extension, it would be $50+ million, about $50 million on the button if the salary cap projections hold, which again, they might not. So that's a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, the number I would have is one that he would not accept, like full stop, so by the logic of, well, I'll ask you a question and then I'll give you my answer. Who's more important to the Warriors, Draymond Green or Klay Thompson over the next 3-4 years?
Oh man. I think it's Draymond Green.
Right.
Just because of everything he brings defensively.
I agree. So if I'm going 4 for 100 on the high end for him, that's as high as I'd go for Klay. And it's like, I don't think he's going to take that. Cause if you're averaging 25 million a year, that's good starter money. That's not all-star money necessarily anymore, because the cap's going up. And I think that's what Klay Thompson is. He played a full season this year, was not an all-star. I don't think deserved to be one. Still a good player, great shooter. Like, I think he could probably defend up a position maybe a little more often if that were necessary. But, defensively, he's not the same. So I think you pay him like a good starter. And that's the Draymond money, basically. I mean, if I had to be like really harsh about it, I would go lower than I would be willing to pay Draymond, honestly.
So you're talking like sub 25?
Yeah. Like if you could do, 4 for 85 or 4 for 90, even something like that. I mean, I think the cap is going up. So maybe I'm, a little out over my skis on that, but the bottom line is like, I would pay him less than I would pay Draymond. I think annual, and in terms of like years and dollars, I think Draymond has more value. Even if like you worry about, well, if Draymond loses a step defensively, then like, what do you have? That's a concern.
I'm also noticing that I had the wrong number in his doc. So I think his max is actually 4 years, 231.6 for anybody who cares, with a starting max of a little over 51. Do you think he signs an extension? Would you predict one, or do you think no?
No, I think the Warriors I think he'd probably like to, but he's not going to get the numbers that he wants. And I think the Warriors like the idea of 43.2 million coming off the books next summer. And then, the options that may afford them, like I don't, I think if the only way that he would extend, I think, is if he were willing to accept way less, way less than the max. And I don't feel like that's likely. Can we talk about Jordan Poole? Where are we?
Yeah, I guess before we even get into the free agency thing is going to be it's minimums. It's even if they move Jordan Poole, it's probably going to be as part of a talent acquisition. And this would, in theory, is going to be the easiest offseason to move Jordan Poole or make a talent acquisition play because not all of the new CBA punitive rules kick in. You're asking me. I think you know what I would do, but what are you? Jordan Poole is guaranteed. He's got that 4-year. What is he guaranteed? 123 million. I think he could get higher than that. What are you doing? Are you aggressively shopping him? Do you think there's a market for him? Are you selling low on him at this point, which is what I think you would be doing? Mm-hmm. Are you letting this ride into the next season? I think you made this point at the top, but I think it bears repeating. The top 5 work. What's so challenging about this roster is you got to kind of figure out the rotation after that. Mm-hmm. And that's a little to say that they need like a 6th or 7th best player who's reliable into the postseason is damning after you gave Jordan Poole the money that you gave Jordan Poole.
Yeah, for sure. So, the reporting by Anthony Slater of The Athletic most recently was that the Warriors are not I forget the exact verbiage, but not actively shopping him. They think it can work with him and Draymond. I feel like that's what you would say no matter what, because you're not just going to say, yeah, we got to get rid of this. They're never going to say that. That cuts against everything we saw. Poole just was not the same player this year as last on either end. And it's hard to unsee that, And so I think they have to look really hard at trading him, which is an incredibly tricky thing because you already need more shot creation, even with him on the roster. And if you trade him, I don't think it's likely you're getting back someone that I think it's highly unlikely you get someone back that is as good as Poole was 2 years ago when they won the title. And you might get someone, it's not that hard to get someone that would be as efficient as he was this past season, but you're really trading away from an area of great need and sort of hoping that you get something back that's of equal value. And then you're still sort of short on the shot creation end of things. So I think you got to try to trade him. I just don't know if you are going to get what you need by trading him. So going all the way back, I guess maybe that's if it is true, that might be part of the reason they're not packing his bags for him, because they just the better statistical play based on probabilities is to hope that he just is better, which is I just don't know how likely that is with this team. I feel like he's a total change of scenery guy. You know what I mean? Do you have anything different? I think you got to move him. I just don't know how.
And that's the how is the problem, because who would be in the Jordan Poole business? I know a lot of people said Orlando, and I'm just I'd kind of rather roll forward with Fultz, Suggs, and Cole Anthony than invest in Jordan Poole.
Well, and who's Orlando giving the Warriors? Who are the Warriors getting from Orlando that they want?
It's also a fantastic point. And it's just if you went after an OG Anunoby trade,
that's the one.
Would he interest Toronto? And then it's okay, well, you still haven't. OG Anunoby would be a great fit for this roster. Don't get me wrong, but you still haven't fixed the main issue with this team. Then, well, not the main issue, but one of the issues where now you've sacrificed what in theory is another layer of shot creation, because OG Anunoby is not going to give that to you. Maybe you trust Wiggins to provide more of it. I don't know. And then I think when you start to get into some of these names, and it might even include OG Anunoby, and you have to make the math work there, yada, yada, yada. The Warriors aren't getting out of that deal giving up just Jordan Poole.
No. I wouldn't. And then you're going to have to extend Anunoby next. If he even signs an extension, then you're going to have his free agency. So that's Anunoby to me is the guy. And I think you would consider Poole and Kuminga, which would have been unheard of a year ago. But I think there's enough smoke now about certain guys on the Warriors griping about playing time and maybe not being as professional as they need to be to know that it's those two guys and maybe a couple others. And it may just be past the point of fixing, So I think, so if it's Poole and Kuminga for Anunoby, I think next year's team looks really scary and awesome. But you don't have shot creation after Steph like at all, and
You can't even
you might
swing
just
like
lose Anunoby.
you can't swing the sign and trade like dual like have Fred VanVleet involved because you just can't complete a sign and trade because of your cap situation.
Yeah.
There's in such a tough like, it would be, I guess, Poole and Kuminga for like how many other Raptors players do they have to take? Probably if you're not going to maybe you could take Gary Trent Jr. if he opted in, but I'm assuming he's in, like you have to take on like Chris Boucher and I think one other guy to make the math work there. There's in such a tough spot. I'm with you. I would move Jordan Poole. I think the most likely outcome though is that I think I've said run maybe in the moment, like being on a radio show or a podcast, I'm like, oh, Jordan Poole will be traded. I would trade Jordan Poole.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's super plausible for you to trade Jordan Poole. Even
It's tough.
and you wouldn't trade, you're not at the point where it's, hey, the Spurs are like, we'll just take him into our cap space. You're not at that point, are you?
No, I don't think so. Cause I think you're if you're trading him now, you're selling low, but like that's too low. Cause you gotta, I mean, he should realize like going into next year, if you would like to get out of here, you just got to play better and act like you care on defense. And you might just, he can rebuild his value that way. It's harder to trade a guy that looks as bad as he looked for in all the games that mattered. I would say too, though, the Nuggets basically played 8 guys in the finals, more or less. And if you count Gary Payton II as a 6th guy that the Warriors trust, and then you're 2 away. If you lose Poole, you're 2 away. And I mean, Moody might be there too. Moody might be that 7th guy.
Yeah, he's
that
interesting.
They trust. So that's still, there's just no big guys, even 4s. Kuminga is the guy that you hope takes a leap, but that I'm starting to feel less confident about that. So, should we talk about some minimum guys? Do you have any minimum candidates?
Well, I had 2 what I think are quick questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess they're the same question. I was going to frame it as, so do you think their biggest acquisition is going to come, their most noteworthy acquisition will be they signed so-and-so to a minimum contract, or is there a higher chance, because now Bob Myers, we talked about this in a previous pod, not there anymore, could like Kirk Lacob and Mike Dunleavy Jr. want to leave their imprint on this roster themselves and then decide, like, now that Bob Myers is gone, does it increase or decrease the likelihood that the Warriors make a bigger swing, which would, again, has to come on the trade market?
I would say it increases it just sort of by definition. But both Lacob and Dunleavy are very much part of like a brain trust that was very collaborative with and like Myers influenced. So I would imagine a lot of the thinking is pretty similar. I don't think there's like it's not like either of those guys was like just a gunslinging transactor, just like waiting for Myers to get out of the way so they could, go crazy. So I think it makes it more likely. And I agree that if the Warriors do something of consequence, it sort of has to be via trade, because the options for them in terms of signing guys are so, as we'll momentarily discuss, kind of uninspiring. But I don't feel like, if I'm betting on a Poole trade, for example, while agreeing with you that they should and I would try, I think it's probably less likely. It's under 50% that they trade him, even if it's like the clear move that everyone agrees like should be their priority.
So any minimum guys stand out to you that are, well, I don't even know if they would be minimum guys, but guys that they could realistically target and hope?
I'm doing some barrel scraping here. So George Hill, 37, like just give him one more chance. This is, if he can play 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that's something. Aaron Holiday probably is going to get more than the minimum, but he's a younger. It's close, right? It's close. He can make open threes. He's a good on-ball defender. He's undersized, but like you're just like someone that's not going to kill us in the 12 minutes that Steph doesn't play. Justice Winslow was kind of interesting to me as like a reclamation. The type of guy that like quote unquote knows how to play, wants to pass, like that kind of thing. It's sort of also in like the Otto Porter mold of let's get this guy that has never stayed healthy and hope that we get the healthy season out of him. But other than that, yeah, like you could just go scan the list of guys that made the minimum this past season and are hitting free agency, and you might just pick and choose. Because the other thing is the Warriors don't have huge minutes really to offer these guys. So all things being equal, you might take the minimum somewhere else if you thought you might get a rotation role. That would not be promised, I don't think, here.
Yeah, which is like, I thought about, would Dario Saric fall into the minimum range? I think he was too good for that. O'Shea Brissett, like trying to think of higher end names that might fall into that. And I just, without a minute's promise from the Warriors, I don't even know how you can hope for that. And I mean, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. Like, do you try and, what's Austin Rivers doing? Like, how much does he cost? Is that someone who could help? It's going to be rough. Aaron Holiday is a good name I didn't think of, and he'll give you some extra rim pressure too.
Right. Because just to piggyback on that, like, you just saw JaMychal Green sign a minimum there and then granted he had an injury, but Anthony Lamb, a two-way guy, was playing over him basically all year. And Ty Jerome played a ton as a two-way guy. So it's like Steve Kerr is not necessarily going to play the minimum guy that you sign with the expectation of a rotation role. Like, that's just not necessarily a promise.
What about Joe Ingles?
I think he might go for more than the minimum, but he's someone that you could. I like that because he can run a pick and roll and he can make open shots, and that's like, they don't need a whole lot more than that out of if you're not getting a point guard, someone like that. That's why Winslow was kind of interesting, is like maybe you get some shot creation someplace else. But yeah, I like Ingles a lot. I think if you said the Warriors got Ingles at the minimum, that's about as good as you could hope for.
That's very much okay, guys, 35 years old. If they say he's going to play, like, maybe he thinks he can win a title. I don't know why he thinks they have a better chance than Milwaukee necessarily, but are we ready to move on to the LA Clippers?
I think so. Please tell me about their breakdown.
So key free agents, maybe Aaron Gordon. He has a $20.9 million non-guaranteed salary. It guarantees on June 28th. We have to have a discussion about him, about whether it makes sense to guarantee him and use him as a trade chip, maybe. Then Mason Plumlee and Russell Westbrook, who's a non-bird free agent, so they can only offer him, 120% bump. Key extension eligible candidates. I won't get into the numbers. I just find it. I wrote it down here because I found it funny that they're extension eligible again. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. It feels like they just signed extensions. So those are their key extension eligible candidates. Their cap situation, they're above the second apron. They will only have the minimums to offer unless they go on an epic salary dumping spree. They technically don't have any notable trade exceptions, but they do have a $2.1 million one from the Reggie Jackson trade that expires on February 9th. That's not even like the minimum anymore for certain veterans. Aren't like veterans now like above 3 in the new cap climate?
I think it's up now.
Biggest needs, I have point guard / ball handler. They could use another big, someone who spaces the floor at the 5, even if they're going to play big or skew smaller. Where are you? What are your thoughts about this team heading into the offseason?
I mean, what about John Wall? Is he available? Could they bring him in at the point? Man, I love that signing. I thought it made total sense last year. It did not.
I was for it. I was like, I found it a little bit surprising they needed to use their entire mid-level, but
he was fresh, man. He'd barely played for like 3 years.
I bet you they would take him for the mid-level this year just because they don't have the mid-level and they might want that back.
We got to start with Eric Gordon because he kind of informs a lot of this. So his $20.9 million guarantees on June 28th. So like we're kind of already up against it. It's not the type of thing you can wait till the next league year. Are you thinking you guarantee that and use him as a trade chip to bring back someone that you could get up? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but someone make up to 24 or 25. Is that roughly what you could expect with that?
That's what I would do. I don't know if they're going to do that because, we talk about Steve Ballmer being willing to pay anything, but whether you're keeping Eric Gordon or turning him into someone who makes as much or a little bit more money, your luxury tax bill is going to be, like through the roof. I think right now if they bring back Eric Gordon and don't add anybody, they're looking at like a tax bill that's going to be like tax and salary that's going to be like in the $500 million range. I think like it's pretty absurd. Oh, there's the cap hole for Mason Plumlee in there. So it won't be that egregious, but we're talking about a team that's going to run you, maybe in the $400 million range after factoring in the necessary taxes and the player salary.
But if you don't do that, if you let the guarantee date lapse or whatever, I just don't know how they build or they add to this roster. I guess you could always you could trade. I mean, he's not your only salary, but like, so I asked because I'm inclined. I would guarantee it, and then I would just
I would too.
view him as a trade chip, and
Or
then
use him. I mean, like maybe he
yeah,
can help you too. Still,
maybe so, maybe so. If he were a little more of a point guard, you might really have your solution. But he just not since his early Clippers days was there any real hope that was the case. Um, I'm trying to think of like, so if you're retaining Eric Gordon, this is a lot of time to talk about Eric Gordon, but he is like low key kind of important. If you're retaining him as an expiring, 20.9 million dollar salary, where are the teams? So you'd want to trade him to a team that just wants to cut money or has a bad contract that they're happy to give back that has a couple years on it. So like
I was even thinking like, do you use him and you're attaching stuff to him where you could trade a future first, you have the number 30. Like, is this a team that
you've got 30 and 43 or 48 in this draft? I think
you have 30 and what do they got? 48.
So let's just say John Collins. Not that that's what they need necessarily, but like if the principals involved are Eric Gordon and John Collins, the Clippers have to give up what to sweeten that, because you are getting Atlanta below the tax, which they care about. I think
they care about it.
Well, this is the other thing. You got to trade him now, right? You can't wait till after the guarantee date, because what you want as the acquiring team is the ability to waive him or to not pick up the guarantee, right? Like that's the way this works. If you're a team that's acquiring him to just cut a bunch of money and maybe have like a pick attached or something, like is that scenario where you're Collins from Atlanta or like Lowry, from Miami or something. I think he probably makes too much actually, but something like that.
Yeah, you'd have to include more money in there. Yeah, I mean that's for sure. I might even just, doesn't his thing, if you're going to take back that amount of money though, wouldn't he have to be guaranteed?
That's the thing. I can never remember the timing of that.
You have to trade him basically as an expiring contract next season. I don't think it would work. It could work if that team has cap space because you can use his number, but so they need to guarantee his contract if they're going to move him. But John Collins is the perfect example in theory, because it's not just about, okay, you trim some salary in the short term, but you're also trimming a bunch of long-term salary because, and look, maybe Eric Gordon takes a buyout that saves you some money off the top of that, although I don't know why you'd want such a big dead cap number on your books. So my guess would be you have to like sweeten regardless. Yeah. And so does Eric Gordon at number 30 get you John Collins at this point? Is that?
I don't know. I mean, that's technically a first, the Hawks couldn't move him for anything. It's hard. I'm just spitballing because I think Gordon is like an interesting piece if you're looking for ways for the Clippers to do something. They could also trade Norm Powell. They could trade Robert Covington. There's still like
Marcus Morris is expiring as well.
Yeah, there's ways to go. But Gordon seems, I don't know, maybe that's not fair.
Do they have enough? If this team is willing to move him, do they have enough assets to get Miles Turner? They have the expiring money that we assume and look, they could send them a combo forward too, which the Pacers might be interested in. They have the number 30 pick. I don't know if they have Terrence Mann. They could give up a future first round pick.
I'm not sure because I don't know how much expiring money appeals to a team like the Pacers, because their books are like looking pretty good going forward. If you had more draft capital, then I think you're probably having a more serious conversation, but I just don't know. Well, it's hard to know because maybe the Pacers want to, be like playing or better status this year, and they're willing to do that. They're willing to take on some veterans. The expiring is like a nice bonus factor. I don't know. What about Chris Paul? Like, there's all this stuff. Like, could they, like, Powell and Morris and Covington, or Powell and Covington? Like, is that like too pie in the sky? I mean, I think that's a possibility too.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that would make sense for them. You want them to have a point guard. I think it's obviously makes a lot more sense if he was waived and you were picking him up at the minimum. But
sure.
Yeah. The fit with Kawhi and Paul George, I go back and forth because Chris Paul is so ball dominant. You don't necessarily want that. And even when Russell Westbrook was on the court with those guys, there was some iffiness. But like Chris Paul is technically a better shooter. He shot like 50% like catch and shoot threes this year. He just didn't take many of them, and that fell off a cliff in the playoffs. I'm also of the mind at this point, it's, well, can you count on both Kawhi and Paul George being available enough that you have to worry about the awkwardness of that fit? And the answer is no.
No, you cannot.
If you don't have to give up any draft equity, I consider it, especially for Phoenix as a team, and we'll get to them. Like they clearly want to just break up Chris Paul and or DeAndre Ayton into multiple contracts. So yeah, I didn't think about them as a trade candidate for CP3, but that actually, if you're looking for someone to take on his full salary, I could see it. That's not a bad idea.
You mentioned Westbrook, like, so they don't have bird rights, so basically they can offer him. I've seen different numbers, but 3.8 is the highest I've seen, which is not going to cut it probably compared to what he might get from who knows where else. That's just like so low. Should they want him back at 3.8? Because I think they should.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
What are the odds they get him back?
I don't know, because if he re-signs with them, I know he wanted to be in LA still after leaving the Lakers, but you would have to think it would be a Batum Jackson situation where there was the wink agreement of we're going to just re-sign you to a bigger deal with early bird rights next year. And that would give me like a little bit of pause if I'm a Clippers fan, at least. But he was good for them. And just like he gave them some rim pressure, the turnovers remained out of control. Sometimes he was hitting his threes. He played really well defensively in the playoffs, but I would like to say that not every game is going to be against Kevin Durant, to where he has that sort of revenge juice flowing. But you should have, for what you can pay him, you should absolutely want him back just for the innings that he can eat up for you when Kawhi and or Paul George are out of the lineup.
I filed today a piece on landing spots that top free agents should avoid. And for Westbrook, it's everywhere but the Clippers, just because like that, like he's been on 5 teams in 5 years and everyone has soured on him more or less. And this is the only place you've been in a half a decade where they're like, we are into the Russell Westbrook experience. Let's have more of this. Like, and you're in LA. He should, right. I mean, you don't want to count the guy's money, but he's made plenty of it. I think like it makes sense for him because he's going to have a role. And it seems like the team actually values what he does, which like literally anywhere else, that may not be the case. And this all assumes he plays like he did for most of his stretch there, which is a big if. Like, you know, that's probably naive to think that he's going to, you know, defend and move the ball as well as he did. But still, he should want to be there.
Is there, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but before we get into minimum targets, is there any chance whatsoever that the Clippers go in the complete opposite direction that everyone's thinking, and maybe there's some selling magic going on here? The answer is no, right?
I don't think so. Don't they have a new arena to open?
Yeah, I think that's in 2024. It's want Kawhi and Paul. You want the team to be good at least for that. And so anyone who's like fantasizing about Paul George and Kawhi trades, I can't even fathom what I would give up for Kawhi Leonard at this point.
It could be so hard to evaluate.
Yeah. Are there any minimum guys that stand out to you for this team? I have a couple if you want me to start it off.
Yeah, go ahead. I got a couple too, but they're very minimum.
I don't know. This is ambitious. Some of these are ambitious. I have Dennis Schroeder. I feel like he might have played his way out of minimum territory. Ditto for Bismack Biyombo if you wanted to kind of fortify the front court. My guess is that they're kind of just looking at a bottom of the barrel that is like or closer to the bottom of the barrel than those guys. So could you go, if you're looking for size, like an Alex Len, or if you want size that gives you floor spacing, are you the team that tries to, roll the dice again on Myers Leonard? Looking at like the point guard situation is just, I don't know. If you can't get Russ back, assuming his team option gets declined, do you take a look at Derrick Rose? What is Goran Dragic going to get this offseason? I would assume he would still kind of be in minimum territory. Do you try and, rejuvenate Kemba Walker's knees? Like,
I didn't even think about him. It's bad when you scroll down the list of free agent point guards and you're like, oh, Reggie Jackson. That's not bad. Like, oh, wait. Wait a second. That is bad. And that's why he's not there anymore.
I was convinced for a moment, by the way, when I had Kemba's name circled, I'm like, wait, did he already play for the Clippers?
I think like Corey Joseph,
okay.
are we in a Ty Jerome? Something he can score a little bit. Like, I mean, we're talking guys that were on two ways. If we haven't mentioned DJ Augustine yet, is it time for a DJ Augustine third renaissance? No, I don't know. I think point guard has to be it. I just like they've run through so many. It's like we're going back to the Patrick Beverly. Well, he's probably getting more than the minimum anyway.
Javon
Yeah,
Carter, if he declines his player option, he's getting more than the minimum.
for sure getting more than the minimum.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Dennis Jr. might be getting more than the minimum too. That's not something they can afford anymore either after the season he just had.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I don't know where you go. Howell Neto, like that's a third stringer that you're going to play it as a starter, or I guess behind Russ. I don't know if we're assuming Russ is back. I guess that's probably more palatable. But yeah, Derrick Rose is interesting, like you said. But we're scraping the barrel here. We started out with the two like most capped out, taxed out teams that just can't sign anybody.
I would say I think there's probably a greater than 60% chance that they end up trading a first round pick attached to some salary to make an immediate upgrade.
Yeah,
before the season starts.
I think. Well, can they do anything immediate? I'm gonna put you on the spot, like that can get them back their mini mid level? Or are they just way too far gone for that? Like not even close, right?
So let's assume that part of that then would involve they'll get rid of Eric Gordon. I'm on the wrong team. I'm like, oh wait, they
could get there. I guess Gordon's is not. So I have them at 183 million.
Without Gordon.
Is without
or
Gordon.
Plumlee.
Yeah.
Without Gordon, no Plumlee. And so you're already over. So yeah, you could dump to open up the you could dump, but that's a lot. To lose Mason Plumlee, Eric Gordon, and then player X.
Yeah.
Who is the mini mid level getting you? Is that all to keep Russ at that point?
Because you're talking, it's got to be Batum or Covington. You wouldn't do it for Zubats.
I'm sure you do it for Marcus Morris, but I don't know like what the. But that's just a lot of.
Is your mini mid level worth Morris, Plumlee, Gordon? Like not even close.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So I don't think they would do that.
Shall I take us through the Lakers here?
Yes, sir.
All right. Key free agents, Austin Reeves. That's going to be a fascinating one, I think. D'Angelo Russell, unrestricted. Malik Beasley, they got a team option on him. Lonnie Walker IV, probably losing him, non-bird rights there. Rui Hachimura is restricted. Dennis Schroeder, who we talked about, they have non-bird rights there. Mo Bamba, non-guaranteed. Probably not bringing him back, I wouldn't think. Jared Vanderbilt, also non-guaranteed. Would be very surprised if they did not bring him back. Not any real extension candidates here that are realistic, I suppose. I think maybe Anthony Davis might be eligible for one, but I don't think that's happening. So they've got a trade exception, $2.9 million for Patrick Beverley and Damian Jones. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm looking at your doc. Not important there, but they kind of overlap. I guess that makes sense because they were in the same trade. What do they need? Everything depends because you don't know which route the Lakers are going to go. Are they going to renounce all their guys and sign a star, or are they going to bring everybody back, which would make their needs like far fewer, I guess. But two-way wings always help. Might need a point guard, assuming they lose Schroeder. And they could always use some shooting. This was a team that when it struggled in the playoffs, the offense was the problem. So you might want to just skew all of your free agent and trade speculation towards guys that are going to juice the offense, and you can just trust Davis and whichever of the core remains to defend there.
I'm seeing what I did to you in my doc now, where I have Patrick Beverley and Damian Jones listed as their best spending tool. That was
well, they're both trade exceptions, but it looked like a copy and paste because they're both 2.9 million and they expire the same day. But that makes sense when you're traded in the same deal.
Yeah, and their cap, you described it best. Their cap situation is it's fluid. So like their best spending tool it's going to be. Probably the mini mid level would be my guess, just because I think you bring back everybody. But if they wanted to, you can keep Vanderbilt, Reeves' cap hold, and get to like renounce everybody else, waive Mo Bamba, and you can get to like 30 million in cap space. I just don't know who that's getting you, who is then worth obliterating all of your depth. I do wonder though, does D'Angelo Russell's performance in the playoffs make it any more likely that they explore, and even Malik Beasley, because I think a lot of people now believe they're going to decline his team option, which everyone thought. I was wondering, do you just pick it up? Do you guarantee Mo Bamba just to have that salary to use as a trade? I still just fall on the side of they value Rui. I don't think you could just let D'Angelo Russell walk, and so I think they're going to be operating as an over the cap team.
I think they sort of have to. For some of the same logic we talked about with the Clippers of, is it worth giving up X, Y, and Z to get this one piece? And it's like, this is a much higher stakes version of that. Cause you're talking about like I can't remember if we said it on this pod or the last one, but anyway, they won 70% of their games after the break. They had the second best record in the league. Bringing this whole thing back, or as much as you can realistically, given some of the non-bird stuff they have on some guys, seems like the play. But then there's Kyrie Irving, even though the Lakers have tried to like speak that out of existence for, several weeks, or sign and trade for Van Vliet or whatever. There's other options out there. I just think, the move is you bring back as much of this core as you can and hope that the tax pyramid level gets you another guy that you can play, big minutes in the playoffs, right? Like otherwise it's just, you're giving up too much.
And and then like even sign and trades just limit you, because then you're hard capped. And that's even the same thing where it's like, okay, maybe you get to a point where you could spend your non-taxpayer mid-level exception, but there's a chance that if you complete a sign and trade, it comes at the expense of, well, we can't use our mid-level exception because we're hard capped and way too close there. I'm with you. And so just use the mini MLE. And by the way, which is like, they should be fine with it, but if they wanted to bring back everybody, like if you guarantee Malik Beasley's deal, and I guess let's just say you get rid of Bamba, but like depending on how much it costs to keep Austin Reeves, D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, you're running into the apron concerns anyway.
Yeah.
And so there's I still think they should be able to access the mini MLE. There's a chance though that if you want to bring back everybody, that you can't even do that. So are there any and first of all, I don't know who the D'Angelo Russell suitor would be that comes in and outbids the Lakers for him. And I would expect Rui to be back. Austin Reeves is interesting because he can get that 4-year deal. That's basically, it would be like poison pilled setup where it's a little over 100 million. I think at this point is what it scales to. I think they would match that. So I don't even think we need to, but is there a team that you could see coming in and forcing the Lakers to go matching that offer? I think there's probably a couple, right?
I think there's a lot of teams. I was going to,
okay.
Well, I feel like I know your answer now, but I was going to ask you, do you have any hesitation about matching the 4 for 98 or 4 for 101 that he's, I think, going to get?
You have to average it out. And that's 25 million a year for who's clearly a starting level rotation player on your team.
Yes.
I don't have hesitation, but it's a lot of money depending on I think you get the option of how you want to spread it out. Like you need to divvy that up so that you're not working with like a $35 million cap hit in year. Cause his max salary in the first year of the third year of the poison pill, which would be the first year that the max salary kicks in.
It's like 30 something, right?
Yeah, it's like 36. I have right here. It's 36.9 million estimated to be at right now. That's wild. 36.9 million is going to be the 25% max in a couple of years. We've come so far. So I think they match it. It really, to me, is just, can they make moves on the trade market with some? That's why you would keep Beasley and Bamba, I think, or you can hope that, is D'Angelo Russell kind of tradable once his restrictions are up in the middle of next year? I actually don't think, I feel like people are maybe overcomplicating this offseason for them a little bit, to where it just, they don't really have all these options because the cap space isn't even going to get you Kyrie. You'd have to do a sign and trade there. That's going to completely emaciate your depth. And it just feels like you're going to bring everyone back. You don't even have well, not everyone, because Lonnie Walker is going to leave. He's a non-bird free agent. You don't even have the mid-end salaries to be like, hey, we're going to trade number 17, like attach it to someone. And that's why in theory you would bring back Beasley at the 16 plus million or Bamba, because it's okay. Well, what can number 17 and this money get us? I think that's probably the biggest move the Lakers end up making.
That might get you Collins if we're going to, if you had roughly 27, 26, if you're combining Beasley or more than that. Yeah. 26 ish. And number 17, that's not bad. You throw
the Hawks are taking on money in that deal though, which they don't want to do. So
then maybe they work buyouts or something. I don't know. I keep just trying to find ways to get the Hawks under.
No, you're right. So that's I would think that, I bet you Lakers fans would be like, I absolutely do not want. I'm not giving up number 17 for John Collins.
Really?
That's my bet. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I probably would, because I still think John Collins is really good.
Yeah.
But
well, I don't know about really good, but he's a good buy low right now, even though he makes 25.
I have faith.
Can I ask you a D'Angelo Russell question?
Yeah.
What are you, as the Lakers, comfortable with paying him years and dollars, whether you view him as like he's going to be our starting point guard, or this is a number we can trade him for a neutral value at?
I think it's like 4 for 104, like 26 million a year or something like that. I was pretty high on the acquisition, but after watching him, I don't know if it's okay. Is it different if he goes through a training camp and has more practice time? But I eviscerated the Wolves for them in my contract. I was so wrong on that front. And knowing how he fell out of favor during the highest stakes moments in the playoffs, that changes my calculus. But you're kind of in you're kind of in the bird right trap with him anyway, because who are you going to get? I guess if you think Dennis Schroeder would come back for the mini mid level and you're just content to roll on, but like D'Angelo Russell was kind of the main centerpiece of that trade. Jared Vanderbilt was good. I thought Malik Beasley's shooting was actually going to translate, but like that was like look at what D'Angelo Russell could do as a pick and roll player and someone who's going to space the floor, and look how young he is, and he'll alleviate some of the ball handling responsibilities for LeBron. And for that to just be where we're at now, I don't know. Yeah. If it's over $26 million a year, I start to get a little queasy.
I agree. I don't know if we talked about this, but there was the report at some point before the Lakers were eliminated where there was talk of maybe we'll bring him off the bench. And it was essentially like, they don't want to do that because they're concerned they're going to lose him, like he's going to check out. And we're in the middle of the conference. I think it was the conference finals, or it was late in the playoffs when this report came out. And I was already sort of out on Russell as like a true star, but that did it. Like, you're really like, this is a concern you have with your starting point guard in a deep playoff series, that if we have to make a tactical switch for the good of the team, he's going to like opt out of giving a shit like that. That's wild. Now, granted, you have to preserve the asset. So I do think you can't let him leave. It's not like, whoa, we're done with this guy. You need to preserve that $20 to $30 million, salary slot, basically. But man, I'm not sure how you recover from that. Like, if that's true, like with your teammates, with certainly the fans, like he's gonna have to make a ton of, timely threes to like offset that type of thing. It was a small report. I'm probably making more of it than it deserves, but like, that's such a telling thing for a guy that I think probably had
telltale, where they're afraid of losing. Like that was pretty telltale.
It's a big deal. Yeah, so I agree. You got to have him back, but there are definitely numbers I would be real uncomfortable with. Both even years. Like, I don't know if I want 4, like 2 and an option. Great, like that's tradable. We can do that. I don't know.
I'm trying to even think. Is there if for some reason if Kyrie left for Houston, maybe you could sign and trade D'Angelo Russell to Dallas, because they would be just so hard up for anything at that point. But I was trying to figure out, because the Lakers could very easily sign and trade him somewhere. I'm just like, what team is going to, I thought about Chicago for a minute, and then I stopped thinking about Chicago after that.
Get Caruso back.
What's that?
Get Caruso back.
I don't think, I would be shocked if we even got that much. I don't know what is the team that would consider rolling would you sign and trade him for Kyle Lowry if that was something the Heat wanted to do?
I think the Heat, if it would not touch D'Angelo Russell.
Okay.
I think he is like the anti-Heat culture player, would be my assessment there.
And I'm like
Orlando, can you do Orlando? Anytime you talk about guards, we have to talk about Orlando.
Orlando's not touching him. No.
They don't want him. Yeah, like there's no, then you talk about caps. I don't know. The thing is, like, is one of these cap space teams interested at a number that the Lakers would have to walk away at, and sign and trade's not on the table? Like, it's hard to see. San Antonio, Indiana, Houston. Houston,
Utah.
Who knows?
Yeah, Houston's a wild card, but there's no way. There's no way.
Yeah, Utah doesn't feel like a great fit. Yeah, I don't know. So I think he'll be back.
Let's play this game then with the Lakers, where will they be back next season? D'Angelo Russell.
I think so.
Malik Beasley.
Yeah.
Mo Bamba.
He's my least likely to be back. I think if they do decide, even though that salary slot matters, I think probably he's got a full non-guarantee at the end of this month. So I think I'd say no. I got to pick somebody to not be back.
Lonnie Walker the fourth.
Oh, also not back. Do you remember what the numbers are on him? They can't. They have non-bird or partial bird on him. Is it non-bird?
No, they have the non-bird. So the biggest salary that they could offer him to start next year is like $7.8 million, which basically like the mini mid level at that point. That might even be less than the mini mid level. I haven't seen a lot of sites have whatever. It's $7.8 million or the mid level.
That's more of a maybe. I think you could get multi-year stuff from somewhere that the Lakers might not be interested in.
Jared Vanderbilt.
He's got to be back.
Yeah, if they only way he's not back is if they trade him, because if they waived him, that would be an all-time flub. Troy Brown Jr.
1.9 is his cap hold. I'd say probably not. He wasn't playing much, right?
Wenyen Gabriel.
Probably not. I think you just go find a minimum guy.
Austin Reeves.
I think he'll be back.
Yeah,
And I
I
think he'll
mean,
be making 25 million a year on average.
are there any like free agents you've thought about for them that stand out that could fall into the mini MLE range for them?
Yeah, I mean, some of them are a little ambitious, like Gabe Vincent. I think he probably gets more than the
Oh,
mini mid
Dennis
level.
Schroeder has to be one of them. I didn't even name him,
Oh
right? Do you
yeah.
think he's back? Like that might have to be a mini MLE candidate at this point.
Well, with the promise of more potentially, because he's going to have a decent number of offers.
Oh, you think?
Well, I just remember thinking during the playoffs, like I think we talked about this, like with the Hawks, he was just such a spark plug offensive player when he was younger, and then suddenly he's like they're one of their best on ball defenders for the Lakers. It's like if you could get like the combination of those two things, that guy can play. Like he's a useful piece.
I actually would be surprised if he got more than the mini MLE.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Would you
I don't know.
use your mini MLE on him if you're the Lakers? I think he might be. And this, I'm sorry to interject on that. I just forgot to name
No,
him in that last exercise. But as
I
you're
mean,
going through the players that they could maybe target, I'm like, he might be the best guy that they could get with that tool.
do you think you could get Seth Curry for the mini minimum MLE?
Ooh.
I think he just made 8 coming off last year, and so
I think he probably could because he has the injury concerns from last year. He had a bunch of them. And also, he just wasn't even in the Nets rotation basically after the KD trade.
But if you want someone to just, I mean, the best version of him is going to provide you spacing like few other guys, you know? So if it's like him or Schroeder.
But my thing is, do you want that in another smaller player who's not going to play a ton of defense? Like you very much need wings on this roster if you're, going to skew offense only.
I think if you bring Russell back, someone like Curry makes way less sense.
That's a great point.
Because they're, you certainly can't play them together against any half decent playoff lineup, I don't think. DiVincenzo, I said. What about Nickeil Alexander-Walker? That's a guy. I'm putting him everywhere because I think he's one of those guys I keep. He's my like buy low darling of the. I don't know if you're really buying low because he's had some moments in the playoffs, but that's someone I'm just like I would like some stock, please, if I can get some.
I just don't know if I want him on that team with like what would his role be if you have D'Angelo Russell? That's another guy where it's okay if it's Schroeder. If Russell's gone and you're going to be able to get Schroeder but even Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he's a restricted free agent too. So that just makes it's world complicated.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm the Wolves, I don't think I let him get away because of the defense that he showed in flashes, like just as an on-ball stopper. And then he's become a good shooter and he's not, he's toned down some of he was one of the most unabashed chuckers like I've ever seen early in his career. And he's toned that down. But yeah, that's all I got for them. I mean,
what about
the bigger options too? We said Kyrie's unlikely. Someone like Van Vliet unlikely. I think you have to look at the mini MLE as their best, option.
Yeah, and that's like I thought about Torrey Craig, Jalen McDaniels for this team, like just trying to get some wing type players. In here. I thought about Jay Crowder for a hot minute, but I feel like that won't go over well with him and LeBron. Like, could they be a team that's like, does Danny Green, like, is he still going to be playing? Do you just get him to have Danny Green back on your team? And he was there when you won a title last. They're just, the mini MLE options feel like they're very much wearing thin.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even I think to bring this back to my initial point, I think Dennis Schroeder might be the best player that they could realistically get with that mini MLE. I mean, even like a Trey Lyles would be kind of interesting for this team.
Yeah.
Looking for some diversification on the front line. That's another name.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I think where did I try to send him recently? What was I forget. We talked about this. I was trying to get him. Oh, I think Philly. I think I wanted him to be.
You wanted Philly to get Trey Lyles and Dante DiVincenzo, right? Was that
That's
the name?
right.
You paired him with somebody.
Yeah. Shall I take us through the Suns?
Bring it.
All right. So key free agents. Maybe you've heard Chris Paul, which is not as simple as just being a free agent.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. So he's just put a pin in that. We'll talk about Chris Paul plenty. Josh Okogie, Torrey Craig, Bismack Biyombo, Jock Landale. Campaign has a non-guarantee, or partial guarantee. I think 2.5 of his 6.5 is guaranteed. No real extension eligible candidates. Their cap situation and spending options are very fluid. It depends on what happens with Chris Paul, if they waive him, how they waive him, if they trade him, all kinds of stuff there. There's the DeAndre Ayton trade potential, I think, that we should probably discuss as well that could affect what their options are. If they do bring everybody back, they're a second apron team, most likely, because that would involve guaranteeing all of Chris Paul's 30.8 and you'd have Ayton's 32.5 on there. There are ways to unlock the mid-level depending on how they handle Chris Paul. The mini mid-level may be there too, depending on how they waive him. I think there are ways. You've got a trade exception for Darius Arch for $5 million. I'm trying to think what else, sort of asset wise and table setting wise, to hit here. I think they can get, if you waive Paul, Payne, and Ish Wainwright, who's I think has a team option, so you would not waive him, but basically get rid of him. That's another way to get the full MLE. I think it would be super close, but yeah. So what do they need? Depth. They have, that crushed them in the playoffs. Durant and Booker just couldn't play 50 minutes a night, it turns out, and be effective. Wing defenders. This is a team that you could sort of pick and choose almost anything in terms of like what they need to fill out the roster beyond their top 4 guys, or maybe top 2, depending on what they do with their 3rd and 4th best players. So can you, if you can't, we can work collaboratively on this. Take us through the Chris Paul sort of options. Like what could this look like for the Suns with respect to waiving him, waiving and stretching, trading? Like what's our sort of choose your own adventure set of options here?
So I think if you waive CP3, which is just you're paying him the 15.8 million and you're taking that dead cap hit, you're not stretching it, you can open up the mini MLE. And some people speculated that if you do that, you could then use it on CP3 to bring him back at the lower number. And it's like, well, then you've kind of scuttled your best spending tool on keeping the same player just to save
like
money.
10 million.
Right. In general, I can't see them going that route. I just don't see what the sense would be behind it. You also mentioned that you could waive him, get rid of Campaign, get rid of Ish Wainwright, and you might be able to open up the bigger MLE. And at that point, it's like, well, what are we doing? You're taking out 2 rotation players. If you're going to get rid of him and it's not happening via trade, I believe waiving and stretching him, because you can stretch him over 5 years. I got this wrong on the podcast because I forgot he had that second non-guaranteed year. You can get the biannual and then the full mid-level. And so if you think, and this will step on the toes of, we probably won't even need to do like formal free agent targets for this team because they'll be talked about in this scenario. But if that gets you Bruce Brown and then someone you use your biannual on, do you think that's worth it to give up CP3? And I don't know, man.
Because you're weighing that. Sorry to cut you off. You're weighing that against trade, what you might get in trade for Chris Paul. It's like that's another avenue you could extract assets from him.
I would say though, the problem is that because they don't have any other assets to attach to Chris Paul, that $30.8 million number is. We talked about the Clippers as maybe a team that would be open to it. Who are the teams that would be open to it? And a lot of those teams, who are the teams that are, 1, open to paying him the full boat, and then 2, they're sending you back 2 or 3 players to do it rather than just this one lump sum contract that you're going to have less of an interest in. And it's just like, if Kyrie left Dallas, would they do Tim Hardaway Jr. and Maxi Kleber for Chris Paul? And I don't know that they would. They might want Davis Bertans in there instead. And if I'm Phoenix, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Chris Paul's still, the way I look at it is, Chris Paul is so important. It's still good. And I think important to what the Suns can do, but they are so top heavy with their salaries that they have to explore breaking him and DeAndre Ayton up into these smaller contracts. It's just so complicated because I think you look at DeAndre Ayton, who's owed 3 years and $100+ million. He's going to be the better asset, I think, because he's younger.
Yeah.
But like Chris Paul is by far, like, isn't he the more valuable player right now? Maybe not by far, but like DeAndre Ayton's season was that upside fucking down.
I think the what gives Paul the edge is that you would not have a real hard time finding a center like that's 80% as productive as Ayton is for $5 million.
Great point.
You could not find a player that is 80% as good as Chris Paul for $5 million. Like it's just the demands of the position and the scarcity of the type of talent that Chris Paul is. Like, it sounds crazy. People may disagree, but I am with you. I think Chris Paul is the guy that, has just more value right now. Now you start talking about like, he does have another, I forget what the particulars are on his 24-25. I think is it fully non-guaranteed?
Yeah, it's fully.
Yeah, that's kind of intriguing. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I jumped in there. Yeah. So let me ask you though, because this is on the same topic. If you could split Paul or Ayton into like 2.5 rotation players, which one makes more sense to go that route with?
I think it's Ayton.
I think you're right.
Just because maybe I'm just weighing too much. I think that you can trade Ayton on his own and maybe get more.
Mm-hmm.
And so with Paul, I just don't see I could see teams being interested in Paul, but like even let's use if the Heat want him as an example, they're going to try and send you, I guess, Duncan Robinson and Victor Oladipo. Does that count as breaking it up enough? Or are they going to try and send you Kyle Lowry, in which case that's just a one lump sum player? The
Mm-hmm.
Clippers, I guess, we talked about it between Rocco and I don't think they would give up Batum, but having Marcus Morris, that would be super awkward seeing him back in Phoenix anyway. So do you rule him out? Eric Gordon's salary, of course. I
Powell.
just, I do you think it's 8-2?
So it's, as I'm thinking about it more, it's like I think Paul is more valuable to the Clippers. I mean to the Suns, but Ayton would have more value on the market. So it's like, you know what I mean? It is that, are those two ideas are like very much opposed to each other. So I think Ayton would be more likely to get you the pieces that you would want, which is also the reason you should trade him instead of Paul, because I think Paul just matters more to the Suns, like, you know, because of the role that he plays and all the stuff I mentioned before. So I think you move Ayton. If you got to move one, I think Ayton is your first choice. Plus, that you still, you know, you don't want to overlook the fact that you have all these other options for dealing with Paul and his contract and stuff that doesn't involve a trade.
I'm just trying to think though of like the DeAndre Ayton trade market itself. We've already established that the Pacers wouldn't trade Turner straight up for him. Would the
Right.
Spurs trade Keldon Johnson for DeAndre Ayton?
Ooh. Well, is Wembanyama the 4? I guess maybe. I mean, I don't know. Keldon Johnson's deal is so much better, but
Yeah.
Aiden's probably a better player than Keldon Johnson, I think, or at least the best version of Aiden, I think, is better. And I'm going to need, you know what? I might need more than just Keldon Johnson if I'm the Suns, and I don't know if the Spurs
Okay.
are willing to do that. You know?
I mean, it could be Keldon Johnson and Zach Collins could be like the deal.
Yeah, that's kind of fun. I kind of like that for the Suns a little bit.
I thought about like Dallas with number 10, Tim Hardaway Jr., and then it's Davis Bertans or Maxi Kleba. I think you would fight like hell to make it not Maxi Kleba, but I don't know if the Suns are going to want Davis Bertans.
No. Yeah, let's see. Where can you move Aiden? Are there any of the cap space teams that you could that
Utah
also
is not going to want him. Indy, again, they have Miles Turner there already. Detroit has enough bigs, I think. Never know with them. Houston,
they got
that'd be a no.
Sengun? I mean, they're
Yeah,
not.
Şengün and Jabari Smith Jr. Yeah.
Yeah, because I wouldn't mind someone like, you know, Jayshawn Tate and like Andor Tari Eason on the Suns. That would be fun. Like, why are you acquiring DeAndre Ayton when you have Şengün and you're probably going to
Right.
in the center too?
We know Brooklyn's not interested in him because he didn't even come up in like the Kevin Durant trade.
Right.
And they have Nick Claxton.
It's tough. I don't know where but would you agree that what percentage odds would you put on Ayton being traded this offseason?
Oh man. I kind of feel like I kind of feel like he's not going to be traded because it involves selling too low on him. And Vogel came in and was already kind of talking about how excited he is to coach him. And there is a higher end outcome where it's maybe reboot his value and then move. Like we've seen him be the co-anchor of a defense that reached the NBA finals not too long ago.
Yep.
And is this someone who just got paid and was satisfied and then slipped off as the year went on this season? Oh, he had like some higher peaks in the middle and then sort of fell off. I think he's young enough to where you can hope that he'll rebound. I don't think he's going to get traded. What about you?
I would have felt better about saying over 50% before we just went through like a third of the league and said no, 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 no. So yeah, I think I agree. I still think he's the guy you should try to trade because in theory he has more value than Paul, I guess, but I'm sort of feeling like I need to walk that back. Like I just don't see where the clear trade is.
I think there's a better like you're not trading Chris Paul and getting Keldon Johnson would be like there's maybe a chance that you could trade DeAndre Ayton and you get a package of like, oh, number 10, Tim Hart. You're not getting that package for Chris Paul.
Would you trade Ayton to the Wizards for Porzingis?
What? Well, then, so you're just saying, okay, we value Porzingis's floor spacing, rim protection, health be damn, because the number is going to be the same. Like KP's technically making more than him when you look at his player option.
Yeah.
Would I do it?
What's that? I don't know.
I feel like that'd be a fun trade. I feel just like, man, you talk about a frail front line looking like, look how skinny like string beanie that KP and Kevin Durant would be.
You would
But
have.
would you do that deal?
I don't know. I doubt it because the injury history with Porzingis, and this is like assuming he probably is just opting in, and then you have his free agency coming up, so you're just getting off money potentially if you don't keep him. You do have to keep Ish Wainwright on the roster if you have Durant and Porzingis as your 4-5 because you just need to just have a larger average body width on the team, and Wainwright would take care of that because he's the widest human in the NBA.
So we think DeAndre Ayton's back in Phoenix next year to start, at least.
I guess.
Do you think Chris Paul is?
That's such a hard question. Do I think Chris Paul is back?
Or here's the is there a scenario? Like I'm trying to think of who they could even get for the biannual, but like if you signed, let's just say, is Bruce Brown and oh God, this is so tough. Is Bruce Brown and I'm trying to be like fairly ambitious. Bruce Brown plus who is worth waiving and stretching Chris Paul?
And the who has to be biannual exception guy, basically.
I'm assuming Bruce Brown's got to be the mid-level guy, right?
Oh yeah. You're not getting Bruce Brown for the biannual. I mean, probably not.
Let's say Bruce Brown and Dennis Schroeder is like the end outcome. And that's like, I don't even think Suns fans would want Dennis Schroeder on a team that has campaign, but like that might be, he might get more than the biannual. So I'm just trying to map out the scenario where it makes sense to waive and stretch Chris Paul to where you're getting enough back. And this made a bunch of sense.
Yeah. The only way it makes sense, and we just talked about how you basically cannot do this, is if you waived and stretched him and somehow got off of Ayton's contract for nothing. For like picks or something, because then you have way more flexibility. You'll have the full mid level. You'll have, cap space that I can't calculate because I just made this up right now. But that's not going to happen. So yeah, I guess he's on the team, right? I guess maybe it's at a reduced salary. Maybe they do the weird, I don't, but if they stretch him though, they can't re-sign him.
It's like, or what about Bruce Brown and Josh Richardson? Is that enough to be like, hey, we waived and stretched Chris Paul, and that made sense? Probably not, right?
I don't think so. I don't think so. So that means then that the way forward is all four of the main principles are back, and you're just hoping to hit on minimums. Is that where we are?
And because can they access the mini MLE as currently constructed? I've been considering their cap scenarios in my head, and sheets are all over the place, but it'd be tight. But if they bring back Chris Paul,
no way. They're at 171.
Yeah, but that's if you keep campaign, which they probably will. So they could maybe use they could use it. It would be tight, but they have to stay under 179.5. It'd be tight.
Yeah, you know what? They could use it.
They'd have to fill out the rest of the roster with minimums, but and look, that gets a little bit weird because they kind of need Bismack Biyombo, and do they want to bring back a TJ Warren or whatever? But if they could get a Josh Richardson for the mini MLE, I would do it. I would just, we'll figure it out.
I think he's worth the mini MLE. And then Schroeder, I think we both agree he's probably getting more than that.
You don't need him. Then you don't need him first.
Right. You've got, and in this scenario, you have Payne back, I think, too. Because if you cut him loose, you're still paying $2 million of his 6.5. So it's like, I don't know.
And if you're looking back in the minimums for this team, what does Yuta Watanabe go for this offseason? Javonte Green coming off the knee injury. That's a pretty valuable player. And you could talk Josh Okogie, get him back, Damian Lee, or would those guys come back? But it just gets so tough. I don't need, I would think Watanabe's earned more than a minimum.
I mean, you never probably, but that would be, if you could get him for the minimum, you would feel pretty darn good about it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think so.
For Jay Crowder for the mini MLE, or is it no?
I wouldn't. Crowder seems like a minimum guy now, right? If he's lucky at this point, don't you think?
Really?
You think you think Jay Crowder's a mini MLE? $7? You pay him $7 a year?
I would just be shocked if he went for he has to be at least a biannual guy or something, right?
I don't know. He just didn't play. And then I feel like I think the way he handled the Phoenix exit is there'd be some percentage of executives that we're out of the Jay Crowder business.
Look, the mini MLE contracts are so short term now, the max of 2 years. that it's just like, I think he gets it.
Let's keep track of this. Over under 7 million, over under full mini MLE for Jay Crowder. I'm saying under. You could say over.
All right, I'll note that.
I did have Josh Richardson as a mini MLE candidate for the Suns, if they're able to use it. Strus is another guy that I wouldn't mind there. But I think Strus probably is going to price himself out of that.
I guess if you get Strus while stretching and waving Chris Paul, but
yeah. The Suns are gonna. So of the team, well, there are a lot of teams that are going to have interesting off seasons in this conference. We still have one left, but the Suns are right up there, considering they've already like cannonballed into the news cycle in early June. It's pretty amazing.
They would. I don't think they're going to decline his team option, and this is a deep cut. But Lindy Waters, the third, would be interesting in Phoenix as just sort of this motion shooter who might be better than Landry Shamet at this point. So is that a minimum guy though? I don't think OKC's declining his team option, but I had him circled for a couple of teams that needed shooting. Seth Curry's not a minimum guy, right? And they also, I feel like they need a little bit more size.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking like, I'm just looking down here. Like the Cavs, I was looking at Lamar Stevens just as like a replacement for an Okogie type or Wainwright type. But I mean, the Cavs have a $1.9 million team option.
They'll just take a flyer on Thaddeus Young after the Raptors presumably waive him.
Yeah, that's one that makes sense because you just bring in a veteran that could maybe give you some minutes at the 5 behind Ayton if you don't manage to bring back the Landale and the Biyombo, the Landale Biyombo 1-2 punch that people will remember for years.
So and it makes it so tough. We don't know their spending range. I think they're going to end up I think they're just going to end up using in the mini MLE and anything they do, it'll happen via trade. Like Chris Paul is back unless he's moved via trade, because I just don't see the scenario. You come off super cheap if it ends up being, to me, waiving and stretching Chris Paul to use the biannual in the mid-level. Okay, great. I just don't know that the sum of those acquisitions are going to be as valuable as Chris Paul.
Yeah, I think that's right. We've had a lot of those scenarios so far it's just not worth it to do this with player X because you can't, recoup that value with other guys. You want to take us through the Kings here?
Yeah. I don't know. How did this turn into, we did the Atlantic Division in such like a swift pace. What the hell happened here?
All right, we'll do the Kings quickly. There's not that much here.
Yeah, so the Kings, but they do have cap space if they want, though, so that's super fun. The Kings offseason vitals, key free agents: Harrison Barnes, Trey Lyles, who they have early bird rights on, Alex Len, he of random playoff minutes, and Terrence Davis. Extension eligible candidates: De'Aaron Fox is actually extension eligible, but I don't think he's going to sign a 2-year extension, so that doesn't matter. Domas Sabonis, 4 years and $129.8 million. He would be eligible for it. We definitely should get into that, whether he would sign it. You offer it, would he sign it? Their cap situation, they get to 20 plus million in room if they renounce everybody, including Barnes. They also have, like, if you can find someone to take on Rashawn Holmes' money, one of the cap space teams, you can get to 30 plus million. And I think that would put you in some interesting conversations. They don't have any notable trade exceptions. Their biggest needs: wing defense, backup, front court depth. And so let's start here. Well, let's start with Sabonis. You offer that extension.
I think you do.
Does he take 4 and 130 if that's the number?
I think he should, or well, it's not should, because I think he probably can get more than that. I wouldn't pay him more than that, but I think he should reasonably believe that, because that's what we're at 4 for 130. You're at like 32 a year, 32 and a half.
I think that's, yeah. It's just because his max salary in that year is, so he's slated to be a free agent in 24, 25, like 42.9. And the max you could extend him at is about 29. That gap is so far away, but I'm kind of with you. Like 4 and 130 feels like the right, even maybe a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's what he's thinking. Like, well, I could get 4 150. And if it's just that difference, okay, fine. You offer it though. Like if you're the Kings, you offer it. If he turns it down, you deal with it and figure it out over the summer.
Yeah, I agree. That is a trick. And that's one that the new rules have made much more plausible than they used to be. Because
with 140% bump.
Because it used to be 120 and that never seemed like enough.
Now, do you anticipate them acting as a cap space team, or do you think it's more likely that they just bring back Harrison Barnes?
Well, so I hadn't thought about the Holmes component of this because for a while it did seem like it made more sense to bring back Harrison Barnes, unless you thought, and we'll just get into it early. Can we is an offer sheet for PJ Washington in the 20 million a year range? Like, is that enough? Is that worth it? Is he enough of an upgrade to justify that? I don't know. But if you can get to 30 by trading Holmes into someone's space with a pick, or I don't know who you'd attach young asset wise, they don't really have a lot of those that they would be willing to move, then it's interesting. Then I could imagine your suite of options gets a little broader. I guess probably, I think the more likely scenario is that Barnes is back, I think, as opposed to replacing him with someone younger that makes similar money. I don't know. What do you think? Because that's like a real pivotal issue for them this offseason.
Yeah. I mean, if it didn't seem like the Blazers were content to just kind of fuck up their world and like fake build around Damian Lillard, whatever you want to call it now, I would be going for the $30 million route and trying to get Jeremy Grant, who's the perfect fit.
Do you think he's that much better than Barnes? Like he's
defensively, yes.
Better. Yeah.
Defensively, yes. I think without question. And so I mean, this is what I would do if I'm the Kings. And we should look, they'll have if they operate as over the cap, I think we start looking at, okay, well, who can they get for the mid-level? And so we want to go through targets quickly before I would map out what I would actually do with them. Just like, I'm not saying these guys would all need the full mid-level, but Bruce Brown on this team, I would full mid-level the shit out of him.
Yeah.
If that, like, Josh Richardson, maybe not a full mid-level guy, but he would make a bunch of sense. You could go the route of, I mean, like, there's not a lot of like bigger wings. Like Torrey Craig makes sense. Jay Crowder makes sense, but you're not going to full mid-level either of those guys. I did think about Dylan Brooks. Would they be a team that should look at Dylan Brooks? I don't know if I'd give him the full MLE, and you do have Davion Mitchell, who's already kind of shrinks the floor for you offensively. And Dylan Brooks is arguably more damaging because he's going to take more shots in all likelihood. But they're a team where, if you think you can trust the spacing, but Dylan Brooks, Sabonis, and Fox, maybe that gets a little iffy. I don't know.
That's the guy, I think. I hadn't really.
I'm like on the fence, like that's the guy.
That's the guy. I am not. I think Dylan Brooks is certainly for the Grizzlies, charitably was doing as much harm as good by the end there. But like this Kings team just does not have a 2 or a 3 or even a 4 that can guard anybody. And then Dylan Brooks checks all 3 of those boxes. So like, if it's the full MLE, that's tough because the spacing is brutal with Sabonis and him. But man, like where are you getting a better value? Because he's one of the best defensive wings in the league, period. Where are you going to get that for $12 million? Like, I just don't. And like Mitchell has value, but he does shrink the floor and he's really a one position defender. Like that's just not the same level. So if you move him or just he doesn't play anymore, that's probably okay. Man, I can't believe I'm all in on Dylan Brooks to the Kings.
I did not. I almost didn't even mention him. So I can't believe that you're all about him there. Yeah, I mean, if you went a little higher end, is this a team that makes sense? You already mentioned PJ Washington. That was a good one. Is this a team that makes sense for Kyle Kuzma? Like if you were going to drum up your cap space a little bit, would you prefer him over Barnes? I think I'd still want Grant. I think I'd want Grant over Kuzma and Barnes. Would you want Kuzma over Barnes?
Is the money equal? Because I think Kuzma expects much more.
I think the appeal of Barnes is that, what is he coming off a season which he made? What was he at? 22?
I thought
what did he make last season? He made 18. Like you could probably get him for a similar number. Where I think that Jeremy Grant and Kuzma are both getting 20+ million.
What do you think about this? We're not talking full MLE, obviously, but what do you think about Matisse Thybulle? Like, just come in and guard people.
Yeah, I mean, and look, he was hitting threes in Portland after he got traded.
Isaiah, I'm just going lower end because like the MLE targets, it's
there. I don't know that there's. I think Bruce Brown, like, might be if we're looking at someone who can play the 2-3. I don't know that anyone aside from Bruce Brown, with regards to this team. I mean, Josh Hart, but he's going to get way more.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't feel like a real free agent to me, Josh Hart.
Yeah, and so like in terms of actual like I don't know who would sign for, and then it's actually worth the full mid level. Bruce Brown is like the best player I keep coming up with, and I might just be selling him short. He might be more than a mid level guy. I did think I wouldn't give him the full mid level, but he's just young and the rim pressure he provides. Hamidou Diallo could be kind of interesting on this team. I prefer Dylan Brooks or Bruce Brown. I'll make that clear, but
I think.
it's.
What do you think about Kelly Oubre? I think he probably expects more than the mid level. I would not pay him more than the mid level, but
That's just so like that's a little too offense for me. I would prefer to figure. I'd rather jump through the extra hoops to be like, let's go for Kyle Kuzma, who's not as going to give you as much defense as a Jeremy Grant, and Kuzma's probably become a little bit overrated defensively in that regard. But why are you giggling?
Because I've already given it away. Do you think the Pelicans are going to pick up Herb Jones's $1.8 million team option? He'd be a nice fit.
Yo, would actually be a nice fit, but the Pelicans are going to pick up his team option. Najee Marshall would work for this team too.
There you go. We got there.
My opinion of the Kings is that anything they do, I think they end up bringing back Harrison Barnes. They'll use their mid-level. And they might break it up on multiple players, by the way, the mid-level.
We never think about it in those terms. That's always on the table.
Yuta Watanabe, I'm going to throw him. You put Nikhil Alexander-Walker everywhere. I put Watanabe everywhere. I think he would be a good fit for this team. Did I mention Torrey Craig, Javonte Green, Jalen McDaniels? Those are all guys. O'Shea Brissett, if you could count on him to make any threes, that'd be a really big deal. Well, not a really big deal, but it'd be a good flyer for this team. I didn't think about them. It doesn't make any sense. But I thought about Naz Reid for a minute. He'd be super fun, but he doesn't make sense for the Kings.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd go for that.
So I want to see them because, and it gets a little tricky because of their pick commitments. They owe a lotto protected pick to Atlanta, but they're good enough to where you can trust it conveying. And so if you're a team and they start putting, you could go this year's pick on the table in addition to other picks where so what do they have this year? They're at number 24 this year, and then they could trade 26, 28, and 30 in theory. They are an OG Anunoby team for me. They need to, I'm not saying they give up everything I just named. I think you could get in. Would you give up Keegan Murray for OG Anunoby? I think is an interesting discussion. They are a team where if you put OG Anunoby on them, I just feel like he completely, they just finished third in the West. So it's not like he reinvents them, but it really just buoys their stock inside what should be, I think, a Western Conference that'll be a little bit more hellfire than it was next year.
Yeah, I mean, I said half jokingly Brooks is the guy, but obviously OG is the guy like that, because you're on a team that gets ridiculous shot creation from a center and has an all NBA point guard. So it's like Anunoby's biggest flaws is an inability to create his own shots efficiently and pass. So not a problem. You just go guard pass. You just go guard the best guy. Well, if he can swing it around, but if he has to dribble and make a decision, it's just it does not end well. Yeah, I mean, so how many of those firsts are you giving up for? And is it picks and Murray? Because they love Murray. That's
and then it's gonna probably cost you the two distant firsts and maybe this year's first for OG Anunoby. And you know what? I'm doing it.
Yeah,
I mean, he's gonna be a free agent, which makes it so tough. It's gonna cost you at least two firsts. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it.
Yeah, because theoretically those firsts probably won't be that good. If the Kings seem relatively stable, which is a wild thing to say in the wake of 20 plus years.
But if you're Toronto and you're like, we just got, let's say it's 26 and 28 for Anunoby, Toronto they have to think about it, right? And then salary, that gets a little weird, but Rashawn Holmes almost gets you there because he's close enough to Anunoby's number.
That's right. And Toronto must know that this cuts against the Kings wanting to do this too, because it's the same argument, but Toronto must know that this, we're looking down the barrel of free agency and this guy is going to get a ton of offers and we may just not want to spend that much. So better to get some assets now and we just don't have to deal with that.
I think he's the guy.
Yeah, I think he's the guy. I think you've cracked it because they're not getting Mikal Bridges, who's another guy you have listed here.
I mean, that would be every pick and Keegan Murray. And I don't know that they would even say yes to that.
Right.
Would you do it if you're the Kings?
3 firsts and Murray for Bridges?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think I do it. I don't think they do it because I think they believe in Murray.
I think the problem with that, is because we know one of those first round picks is 23, 24, whatever it was. That's whatever. So then you have to weigh those two future firsts plus Keegan Murray's just a lot.
Yeah.
You want to take us out of here, and we are going to, I never want to do 90 minutes on one division again. This was absurd.
You got to have a timer that actually like beeps so we can't ignore it. Yeah. Everybody that stayed with us, I mean, Kings fans, thanks, because you're probably the only ones that made it to the end of this alphabetical Pacific Division list. You can follow us on our socials at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and TikTok, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. Rate, review, subscribe on Apple. That always helps us out. Subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching this right now, please just move down a little bit and click that thing. That's helpful. Tell your friends and enemies, and I will shout out. Also buy some merch. It's going to be linked in the description. And you can wear it or drink from it, as the case may be, while you're listening to us and watching us. So shout out to Frank Ntilikina. Apologies to Jared Allen. Thanks everybody for listening.